The all-consuming Red Death. 600 years ago, King Arthur led the Great Escape from the homelands, where our kingdoms were ravaged by the plague. Leading people to Avalon, he started the Age of Conquest and took the island from the Four Dwellers. Using the mysterious powers of Menhirs, together with Merlin, they cleansed the land of the Weirdness, a primordial force of chaos and possibility. But now, long after the death of the king, Camelot is in shambles as Avalon fractures into chaos. Old legends are gone, and the Weirdness is creeping back into our lands. The bleeding heart of the plague has started beating once more.
In this Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon video, I'm going to be showing you guys a new open world RPG that's just came out on early access on Steam just a day or two ago. Tainted Grail, the Fall of Avalon is a video game adaptation of the board game of the same name that was published in 2019 and is developed by Questline and published by Awaken, who kindly sponsored this video, so thanks to them for doing so. And if you guys are picking this game up on Steam in early access, make sure you use our link below to support the channel. So before I get into the actual gameplay mechanics of how this game works, first let's talk a little bit about the story of this game. This of course follows the Arthurian legend. You might be able to guess that by the title of the game, but it's a bit different. This game takes place hundreds of years after King Arthur's death on the Isle of Avalon, and bad things are occurring that were once wiped out by Arthur when he first conquered this island. These things are creeping back up, and the island is covered with all kinds of undead enemies and various things that are affecting the residents here, the Britons, if you will. And you are basically trying to figure out why this is occurring and put a stop to it before the whole island is consumed in Red Death. Now, one of the things that I've really enjoyed so far about this game during the early access period, early access is about 10 to 15 hours of gameplay. It's going to run for about 9 to 16 months. And then it's going to come out of early access, and during that time they're going to add more content to this game. If you actually take a look at the game map, you can kind of see the area that you can go to, and there's this sort of map part that you can't see yet. I'm assuming that's what the rest of the game is going to be. But what I've really enjoyed so far about this game is the mysterious elements surrounding the game. It's very like drop you in and let you sort it out sort of a game. Like you are not given like tons of direction. You have a main quest line, but everything you come across outside that main quest line is kind of like up for you to discover and figure out. There are things you can interact with that you are missing items from, and there's like little lore elements here and there of the story that you are kind of left to your own devices to figure out. It's kind of like got that Souls-like feel to it, if you will, for lack of a better comparison, where they sort of just drop you in this game world and you're kind of on your own trying to figure it out other than the main quest line. I really like that. It made for a really fun experience, and I think people are going to enjoy just walking around and trying to figure out like where to go and like what to do and how to interact with things. And it'll give you that moment when you figure something out like, oh yeah, now I know what to do. And I really like that. So besides that, kind of getting into the gameplay mechanics, this game really reminds me of Skyrim or Oblivion or one of those types of games. It's got that open world setting where you go into different dungeons and things like that you load in, and you do these little mini dungeons and you come back out. But beyond that, your character progression is very similar to those games. And the reason for that is you go around on the landscape and you start attacking enemies and fighting enemies. You are going to level up the abilities of the things that you use. For instance, if you use a one-handed sword and you attack enemies, then you're going to gain one-handed, which is going to increase your damage with one-handed weapons. Same is true of two-handed weapons, same is true of magic or bow. So your character gets stronger in the way that you use abilities and attacks throughout the game, just like you would in those games. And as you play the game, you'll find better and better gear. You'll find, like, for instance, one-handed swords that are stronger or have higher damage ranges, so you do gain progression through the weapons and equipment themselves. But for instance, you'll find, like, light armor or medium armor, and then you'll wear a piece of that equipment and you'll get hit. You'll actually level up your medium armor or your heavy armor, depending on what armor you're wearing, or light armor. Which also reminds me of those games, you know, Oblivion and Skyrim, where that was the case with them as well. And then you'll actually gain more damage protection from wearing those types of armors in the future. So figuring out what sort of armor you want also goes hand in hand here. Beyond these elements, though, you also have attributes that you can put points in. Every time you level up, you're going to gain an attribute point, and this allows you to get stronger, to be able to like, increase your melee damage or increase your bow damage or spell damage, to increase your stamina regeneration. The game has a stamina system with dodging, blocking, and attacking, so you have to manage your stamina while you're fighting in combat. Kind of like a first-person Souls game a little bit. And so as you level up and you gain these attribute points, you sort of shape your character along with the things that you're using in combat. Obviously, you can level everything up if you want, but you kind of go down 1 or 2 focuses usually in order to make your character stronger in those aspects. And then beyond that, every other time you level up, you'll gain a skill point or a perk point. They're kind of like perks, but they're called skills. You'll gain like a passive effect from, that's wrapped around one of the attributes. For instance, you can gain more headshot damage with bows, or you can gain increased stamina recovery, so that when you're fighting in melee combat or whatever, you can dodge more and attack more, or block more and attack more. Very good for melee fighters. And there are all these different perks that you can gain, or skill points you can gain, that as you level up higher and higher, you'll be able to gain access to higher tiers of these skills in each stat, depending on if you put points in the previous tier or not. So you kind of shape your character through the attributes, through the equipment that you use while you're fighting in combat, through the equipment itself, and also with these skill points. And it makes for a really interesting combat experience and character development. I played, probably in the 5 to 7 hour range of this game. And the more I played, the more I got sucked in because of these elements. The more I kept going like, maybe I should start over and do like a mage build and focus more on magic and see how that goes. Or maybe I should prioritize bows and try a build like that. Found myself gravitating more towards the melee side of combat, which I kind of got down a little bit into the game. Take a little bit to get used to. But I really found it fascinating the way these builds happen. Reminded me of those games, Oblivion and Skyrim. And I really, really enjoyed that aspect. So outside of combat, you're going to be talking to NPCs and making decisions. There are different factions vying for this game. And also, interacting with things on the landscape, trying to solve puzzles and gathering resources in order to craft food and craft weapons and armor and stuff like that. And there is kind of a mild survival element to this game. I wouldn't say it's very survival, although I guess technically it falls into this category a little bit. You can craft food to heal yourself, or you can rest to heal yourself, but you don't have to eat to not be hungry, or sleep to not be tired. So it doesn't have some of the basics of survival aspects, but you will craft food to make, stuff to heal yourself where you're, in a dungeon or something where there's nowhere to rest to heal yourself effectively. So there is a little bit there. And obviously you can craft gear and equipment as you find recipes and, materials to craft as well. So there is some of that wrapped up in the exploration of this game. So moving into the aesthetic of the game, you'll notice while you're running around on the landscape, etc., it's far darker than something like Oblivion or Skyrim, though. The tone of this game is very much like a dark RPG. You'll see skulls, and there's a lot of blood and undead and creepy blood lakes, and there's gallows and undead soldiers everywhere. It's very, very dark. Almost has a Diablo type first world feel to it, except minus the heaven and hell elements. And it's very, very dark. Yeah, and I actually really, really like this aspect. Wrapped with the Arthurian legend, which is one of my favorite legends. Really, really like the lore and mythology of that. It makes for a really interesting experience. It's a very adult feel to the game. And it's something probably a lot darker than most first-person open-world RPGs that you would play. Graphically, though, I don't have a lot of great things to say about how the game visually looks. There are moments where it does look stunning depending on how you're standing and the lighting of the game and the sun and the rain, etc. There are moments it looks very nice. But generally speaking, the graphics aren't anything mind-blowing. They're nothing to write home about. I'm coming from Sons of the Forest, which I played recently, which looked gorgeous. This game's just kind of in the middle somewhere. It's not terrible, it's not great, but I will say I did have performance issues with this game. It was very difficult to maintain 60 FPS on a 3080 Ti playing at, high settings on 1440p graphics. I could keep 60 FPS, but I couldn't get really higher than that, and periodically, as you were moving into a new area or something, it would kind of grab for a second and plunge the FPS down and then come out of it. It wasn't very often, but it did happen enough to note it down. Didn't have really any bugs other than maybe pathing of enemies, that would get stuck in things sometime. But I didn't have any other bugs so far. Obviously, this is an early access game, so these things are going to get polished up over time. I want to mention them here and point them out to you that, your experience might vary a little bit depending on what PC you're playing this game on and what settings you're playing it on. But again, it is an early access game. These things are going to get polished up over time. Bugs are going to get polished up. But I didn't really have too many bugs or anything like that, so I think generally the game's in a pretty good state, other than I worry a little bit about the runnability on medium-end PCs. If you don't have a pretty good graphics card, you're probably going to be playing this game in 1080p, which still isn't terrible looking, but it's not the greatest. One thing I do want to mention, though, before I wrap up this video, is that the sound of this game is really pretty good. The music, in my opinion, really sets this sort of somber, dark tone of the isle that you're fighting on. Kind of gives you this gloomy feeling, and the voice acting in the game is actually really good for a game that's, an indie game, really. So I was actually really happy with the voice acting. I can't wait to see more of that. The characters themselves are very well voiced, even just regular characters. So I was actually impressed by those things, too. So as I mentioned, Tainted Grail is now available for early access on Steam. It just came out like a day or two ago, so brand new. If you guys like the look of it, if you're looking for a new open world game to sort of check out and you want to pick up the early access, use the link below to support the channel. So what do you guys think of Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon from the gameplay you've seen so far? Does it kind of remind you of a darker Skyrim? Questline also made another Tainted Grail game that was like a turn-based RPG that has a very, very good reviews on Steam. So I think people are really going to like this. Let me know what you think in the comments below.